It is now clear that subsidy on fuel will no longer be removed in June this year, as earlier planned by the federal government. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, spoke to State House correspondents at the end of NEC meeting in Abuja. That's where this was revealed. And let's discuss this more and put all that was said at that meeting into perspective. What does this suspension mean? I'm being joined by the Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Assets Management Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Mr. Chukwu, it's good to see you. How's your Friday going?
Thank you, Tolu, for having me. My Friday is going very well. A couple of meetings, but thereafter, I had to create time for your program.
Of course, thank you so much for that. Let's start with, what was your expectations? We've gone this route before, talking about subsidy removal and what it means for us as a country. Now government is saying there needs to be a little bit of break. Now, how does this affect the Petroleum Industrial Act? Maybe we start that way, because there needs to be a rejig one way or the other, because the law says a particular time subsidy must go.
Okay, if we have to start from that perspective of your question, in the first place, at the current time, the Petroleum Industry Act is already not being a petroleum industry. And if you recall, that bill was signed into law on 16th of August 2021. So by January 16th, 2023, the transition period specified by that law had elapsed, but subsidy continued until now. And there was no amendment to that law. Some of us had actually cried ourselves hawks that if the government was going to extend the period for subsidy beyond December last year, that the government needed to amend the Petroleum Industry Act. So it is no longer a new thing that the Petroleum Industry segments of the Petroleum Industry Act is not being obeyed. So we must recognize that it goes beyond obedience to the law. The law is already being observed in abeyance. That's one aspect. So whether the government will now decide to amend that law, to extend it further, is a different thing. But as it stands today, the current government is actually breaching that law.
Great. So now that has happened, and there is no provision for subsidy after June 2023, according to our budget, where do we get the money from?
Well, I think I also take the second aspect of your question, and I come to the third one. You know, the second aspect of your question, which actually what we started with, is that, was I expecting this? And I would tell you, yes, I was. And I had said this to several people who engaged me in conversations, that it's quite unlikely that the subsidy will be removed the 29th or 31st of May. Simple reason is that the election process did not go as smoothly as most people expected. The outcome of that election was not determined by the majority of citizens. If you look at the voting pattern, you observe that the total number of registered voters for 2023 election was 93 million. Number of those that collected their PVCs and were willing and ready to vote was about 87 million. But the number of people that voted for the president election was only 8.7 million, just 10%. And that was the lowest we've had since the advent of the current civilian government. So what that means that I have always said that the president-elect, if he is able to overcome the legal issues and gets sworn in, will have to first win the hearts of citizens. And that if you assume power without that populist followership like Buhari had when he came in 2015, where we had a populist president elected on kind of populist orientation. At that point, the citizens were ready to take any pain. Right now, if you look at the mood of the citizens, they're not ready to take additional pain. And I felt that the wise thing to do was first settle down into government and then begin to win hearts and souls, and subsequently begin to introduce decisions and policies that will have some unpleasant side effect on the citizens. Ordinarily, I've been an advocate of take out the subsidy, but you also be conscious of the political ramifications of taking out the subsidy at this point in time. And I don't think any good politician will want to do that, given the mood of the country. So that's, I had actually predicted that. So I wasn't surprised when I heard that the National Council had decided to shift the implementation. Now, back to your other question, where will the money come from? The money will come from where it has always come from, government borrowing. Because as it stands today, the government has continued to borrow. If you look at the current budget, the 3.6 trillion 3.36 trillion the government budgeted to spend the first half of the year on subsidy was going to be borrowed. Last year, all that was spent on subsidy was borrowed. Because if you look at the budget of last year, the actual performance of last year's budget, by the end of November, which was the month to the end of the fiscal year, the government had spent 12.83 trillion naira, but the government had only generated at federal level 6.5 trillion naira. In effect, government borrowed 6.3 trillion naira. Of the 6.5 trillion naira the government spent, generated, 5.24 trillion naira was spent on debt service, leaving only 1.2 trillion naira, which clearly shows that the government borrowed the entire amount that was spent on subsidy. And that's what we're going to go back to. So, in effect, this decision to extend the subsidy will mean that the federal government will further increase its borrowing beyond even what we have in the budget. And that means the incidence of the borrowing or debt will continue to intensify. We're talking of debt service to revenue of 80% as of November last year. IMF said we have gone to more than 90%. And if we have to borrow further, then that will worsen. But clearly, if we have to sustain the subsidy beyond May 31st, the money for the subsidy will have to be borrowed.
Now, Mr. Chukwu, I see that there's a social and economic implication of subsidy removal, and I think you alluded to that, part of that in your submission, talking about people reacting and all of that to it. But I would like to ask you this question this way, like everyone would always want to ask, that there is perceived corruption in the downstream of the oil and gas industry, level of consumption or number of liters that we consume daily, whichever way you like to put it, and issues of smuggling of petroleum products. Some will say, why not try to address this and let's get the actual number of what we consume on daily basis. Maybe that committee should get into that and address some of these issues. Because in Benin Republic, very close here, fuel is sold for above 500 naira per liter. Clearly, that's economical for anybody to want to make money.
Yes, I'm happy you have ended your comment with that. There is a limit to policing, effectiveness of policing. When you create an economic structure or a policy environment that incentivizes corruption, incentivizes short-circuiting the system, incentivizes
Well, audio there. We hope to have Mr. Chukwu back very shortly.
And they won't see people abusing it. Like correctly pointed out, if you go to Benin Republic, you sell fuel for 500 naira or thereabout. The same thing with Cameroon, the same thing with Chad, the same thing with Nigeria. And these are countries that are contiguous to Nigeria's borders. So what happens is that because you are buying fuel here at maybe 198 or 200 naira, it then makes sense for anybody who is not such Mother Teresa or who is not a purist to try to smuggle that product to neighboring countries. I remember the level of poverty in the country where people don't really care about their lives. People breach pipelines, people breach, including product pipeline that are easily inflammable. People breach them just to take fuel from jerry can. So imagine the incentive we are giving them when they know to just cross the border and I can sell the product at 100% margin. So until we have a market-effective petroleum pricing system, you really cannot police Nigerian borders effectively as to eliminate smuggling. We must have that in mind.
Stuff there, the network there challenging your audio, but we're able to get the best of your response. But now, as it is, where do we go from here? Because I tend to be very worried about the PIA again. Are we going to achieve what we set out to achieve with the PIA, which is supposed to attract investment into the oil and gas industry? When you're talking about this, it's another two-in-one question, relating it also to gas, which is where we want to start to look at clean energy, something that could make more sense, and we could, we have a lot proven and unproven reserves of gas. So what do you think? How does the PIA help to regulate all of these sectors? With all of these challenges, would we still achieve what we're set out to achieve?
Okay, our intention is that the PIA will also incentivize investment in downstream Nigerian petroleum and oil and gas sector, particularly in terms of refining. Until the subsidy issue is addressed, you're not going to have refining in the country. But what should we do now? I think government should introduce price modulation. When I talk of price modulation, today, Plat has come down, the price of crude has come down, so which means spot import of petroleum product will decline beyond what it was before. I mean, the landing cost, and that means subsidy amount that the government is spending will be less. So given that the landing cost of petrol will reduce because of Plat has come down, then the government should start some level of modulation. So they are doing incremental increases, maybe every 6 months, while the government is trying to build consensus and build followership and support from the citizens. Then it should begin to adjust the price of petrol. And at some point, we will achieve a price level that will eliminate subsidy. And at that point, you need to announce subsidy has gone, and whatever happens in the international market will reflect at the local market. So if prices come down internationally, local prices will come down. If you look at one of the white products, which is AGO, that is diesel, you realize that diesel price has come down to just about 600 naira, 620 naira per liter. At some point, it was close to 1,000 naira. It was over 900 naira per liter. Because Plat has come down, so the price of diesel has come down. And that's what will only happen if you have a full deregulation of the price of fuel. Then, as it relates to, like I said, attracting foreign investment will be a tough call, particularly even local investment, particularly in the downstream petroleum industry, because nobody will want to look for local markets and sell to or hope that its government will buy from you and pay you your full cost plus some margin, and then go and subsidize and sell to the public. Because if they don't buy from you, you are dead on arrival. So we must have that in mind. And then when moving to the second aspect of the question, which of gas, I was quite happy when I read this morning from yesterday's paper that the group managing director of NNPC Limited, had said that there was a lot of progress on the AKK gas pipeline that will take gas to Kaduna and Kano, Ajakuta, Kaduna and Kano pipeline, gas pipeline. I was quite happy when I saw that there's a lot of progress on that, because there was always doubt whether it can be funded. So what government should do is focus on gas transmission, gas distribution, so that people can use gas as alternative energy source. Vehicles, once you have gas everywhere in the country, people can actually begin to convert their vehicles to gas energy, so that, put a gas cylinder or gas tank in their vehicles and take out the petrol tank, so that they will run around on gas. That obtains everywhere in the world. So if you go to Western countries, many of the countries are setting time limits for use of fossil fuel as energy source for transport sector. Nigeria should also begin to look at that. Unfortunately, we have such weak energy supply, public electricity supply, that we cannot effectively introduce electric cars, because those cars have to be recharged, and if there's no power, when you get to a certain point, you may end up getting stranded on the road. But at least we have gas. Let's expand the gas transmission pipelines. Let's expand the gas distribution pipelines. And that way, we will see people pivoting away from fuel and adopting gas as alternative energy source.
Now, before I let you go, Mr. Chukwu, the argument of opening up sectors like concessioning, like privatizing and all of that, as many would say, that's the order of the day, and with particular focus on what is happening around the Ajakuta steel plants. There have been a lot of comments around that. I'd like to ask you, what really is the regular or normal process of concessioning? And do we really follow due process around this space?
Well, let me take it from what is the normal process of concessioning a public asset. The first thing is that the agency of government in charge of that asset will, first of all, seek for financial advisors. And when they appoint financial advisor, advise on how to go about the concessioning, the financial advisor will prepare what we call outline.
Wow, network again. We hope to have Mr.
For it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it will define the requirements that the concessionaire have to meet, concessionaires have to meet, and then it will define what the objective of the concession wants to achieve, the minimum performance standards of the concessionaires, and then draw up the bid criteria. And then the possible concessionaires will now bid. And then the financial advisor will also prepare the full business case. And that business case will encapsulate all that is required to be done. It's on that basis that the concessionaires or prospective concessionaire will be assessed. And then even after that, once they are assessed, you go to ICRC, with the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission, at each level of this outline business case, full business case, and the bid criteria that will be published. And it has to be published with the timeline given to the public to bid or submit their bids. And those bids should come, both technical bid and financial bid. The bids should be separated, the technical bid and financial bid. They must be open in public view, and the bidders should also witness the opening of that bid. So, and they are assessed based on their technical application and their financial application. So these are some of the processes you have to go through before you settle for a concessionaire. And that concession will even have to be approved by the Federal Executive Council for such a huge asset, national asset.
That's a thick one. I must thank you so much, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, for your time on the program today and for your contribution as usual. Mr. Johnson Chukwu is the Group Chief Executive Officer, Cowrie Assets Management Limited. Thank you so much and have a great weekend.
My pleasure.